Yes, hello everyone, and thank you for joining in, right? I believe we can go ahead and start this, what promises to be a very engaging session, right? We plan to be here for the next hour and a half. And during the course of this webinar, we have two information-packed presentations that are going to be centered around AWS Direct Connect and how businesses can take advantage of this solution that is now available in our region. So I am your anchor for this event. My name is Kelechi Kunsofo, and I am responsible for cloud and content business here in Rack Center, Lagos, Nigeria, which is where we're live from at the moment. So before we get right into the event proper, we just want to set a few housekeeping rules. First of all, we don't intend to keep you here longer than 90 minutes. And during the course of this webinar, right, participants are available to use the chat box for discussions, interactions, while we reserve the Q&A tab strictly for questions that we will address, that will be addressed by the speakers during the course of the webinar. For further inquiries after this event, because we want to keep the conversation going, you can always reach us at info@rackcenter.com. Note that Rack Center is TRE. So as we transition into the presentations proper, we just have you know that this is part of a series of webinars designed to achieve three main objectives, right? The first is, we as an institution like to keep leading the conversation around innovative data center solutions and connectivity. Secondly is that we keep showcasing new initiatives, just like today's discussion that we're focusing on AWS Direct Connect. It's a perfect example of how we continuously evolve to provide robust and scalable solutions to our ecosystem partners. And the third broad objective, is we also like to spotlight our ecosystem partners, right? We demonstrate the strength of collaborations and the value they bring to the local and global community as a whole. So let me, so during the course of this 90 minutes, we will be, first of all, just like we started, we'll do a brief overview of the webinar series, which I'm gladly taking. Then after that, we will go straight into the first presentation, which will be taken by our representative from AWS. Right after that, we will have a second presentation by AFKIX, and then we will then go into the Q&A sessions. We'll close off with a summary of what we've learned from these sessions and provide you information on subsequent events that we have coming up in Rack Center. So just to set the stage, right, I mentioned collaborations earlier on. So there are basically three parties in the room right now. First being AWS. They're a global household name, especially among enterprises. And the AWS cloud team is actually a spin-off from Amazon when they launched in 2006 with the first solution called Amazon Simple Queue Service. Now, currently the global leader in cloud computing and reputed to have 31% market share, right? Extensive portfolio. They have over 200 fully featured services from data centers around the world. For the Direct Connect service itself, it was launched here in this region, Lagos, Nigeria, about this time last year, right? And for us to note that this is actually the second geographic location that is being launched on the continent of Africa, which is a big feat. And they're available right here in Rack Center. Now, Rack Center as an institution started operation, 10 odd years, back. Started operation in 2013 and have demonstrated 100% availability uptime on our data center solution, right? Currently running a tier 3 certified facility, right? And have grown our ecosystem to about to 67 networks currently, and are driving this through a robust quality management framework. I mean, we have several ISO certifications in the bag, and this is one of the key attractors for our ecosystem partners. Now, in terms of how we're positioning for the future, we are at the advanced stages of construction of our second facility, which promises to be a 12 megawatt AI hyperscale ready facility that we're looking to go live before the end of this year, 2024. That facility has already been stamped by the IFC Edge, certified data center, which is the first in this region meaning Europe, Middle East, and Africa. As for AFCIX went live in January 2023, and it's currently the fastest growing internet exchange point in Africa. To date, it has registered 31 participants, and it's growing at an astronomical rate of about 200% month on month. It's strictly Africa focused, and it's powered by DKIX, which happens to be the leading interconnection platform globally. So with that said, I would like to introduce the first speaker on the webinar today. It's my pleasure to introduce to you speaker from AWS, Ashraf Altaleh. He's a solutions architect at AWS, and he has extensive experience across 3 continents in assisting global and AWS customers in executing their public cloud adoption programs. He's been part of the AWS team for the past 10 years and has been guiding customers on designing scalable architecture, as well as interconnecting their cloud and on-premise infrastructure. Today, he will provide an in-depth view of AWS Direct Connect, its benefits, and real-world use cases. At this point, thank you very much. And Ashraf, over to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction, and welcome everyone to this session. We're gonna be talking today about AWS Direct Connect. So I'm gonna just share my slide. And I don't think I need to introduce myself now, so we all have a bit info about me, but just to I'm based out of the Dubai office. I'm a solutions architect, and I'm also part of a team that we talk to customers about networking. And are you able to see my screen? You guys can confirm. Yeah. Awesome. So
not yet. Not yet. Yes. Oh yes. Please go ahead.
Awesome. So one of our core networking services is AWS Direct Connect. And today we're gonna just dive deep into the service. But before we talk about Direct Connect, let's talk about how our customers connect to our regions globally. We have regions across, I believe the last time I checked was 33 regions, and customer launches resources in these regions. They have public resources and they have private resources. When we talk about public resources, it's like connecting to S3 to, for example, back up your data, or you can connect to your private servers running on a virtual machine, which we call EC2, inside your isolated network, which we call VPC. So customers want to connect these different resources. So you can go through the internet using public IPs. You can use application level connection like HTTP, HTTPS. You can create private connectivity to your VPC to connect to your private IP space using VPN. Or you can use, for example, SD-WAN for it, for customers that uses SD-WAN. There's another option when you want more consistent and more performant network, which we call AWS Direct Connect. And Direct Connect is just a service that allows you to have that physical connectivity from your data center into any of our regions. So Direct Connect, basically, like how we describe it, it's a dedicated connectivity to AWS Cloud, whether if it's a public resource or a private resource. It's basically a fiber cable that goes from your data center to AWS region. So once you are connected to one of our locations, you'll be able to connect to any resource that you have inside AWS. Even when you open your console, you will be open it through a connection that goes through that dedicated line. So we have now established what is a direct connect. It's a more and the benefits of direct connect is that it gives you that consistent performance. If you're going through the internet, sometimes we refer to it like a spaghetti network because you go through different service providers. There's a lot of factors that can have an impact on the connectivity. There's latency. When you use VPN, there's the overhead of encryption, decryption of data. So you don't know how the network will perform. When you have a consistent bandwidth from Direct Connect, which can go up to 100 gigabit per second in certain locations in the US, you can predict what is the latency. And for that, you can plan how to run your applications and all that, and which regions to use and where to connect from. It lowered the cost. It's a pay-as-you-go service. So basically, it's also how you save cost by paying for a service for connectivity. Imagine if you need, for example, 100 meg for your internet connectivity that you use for AWS and other things. When you have a direct connect, you don't need to have the 100 megabit per second for your internet connection. You can split it between a direct connect and an internet connection. Direct connect comes with a low cost, and also we don't pay for data traffic going into AWS. So you're backing up data to AWS. Any data that you send through that link, you don't pay for it. You only pay for the data leaving AWS. And it has an SLA. Currently, we have a resiliency for an uptime with Direct Connect for 99.99% SLA. It's available in over 100 locations worldwide. We have an excessive amount of partners globally that help customers to connect from their local data center to AWS. And this is what we're talking about today. And comes with security. It's a dedicated line. You can also have private encryption for your 10 and 100 gig links. Cool. So why do we need that private connectivity, right? Like I mentioned, it gives you that consistent performance. So if you are if your application is latency sensitive and you need to make sure that you have the right amount of bandwidth, and this is the latency that I'm looking for, then this is why you need Direct Connect, right? Also, when you have a legacy system and you want to connect it to AWS, you need to also have that hyper connectivity. So you want to connect your Direct Connect to your local data centers to connect these applications. It also help you to transfer a large amount of data from your on-prem to AWS. Let's say you want to back up your data, so you can have Direct Connect to back up this data, and during migration, because during migration you need to send that big amount of data to AWS, and you need that consistent bandwidth with low latency. And also Direct Connect lower your costs for that private connectivity, and you can cancel it anytime you want. So you can, for example, if you're doing migration over 6 months, you can use Direct Connect for 6 months, and then you migrate all your resources, and then you don't need the Direct Connect anymore, right? But a lot of customers keep that link, especially when they have an office with their end users are in the office and they want to connect that office to their resources in AWS. So your application doesn't need to be in a local data center. You can run everything in the cloud and just connect to it using Direct Connect, because you will think about it as an extension of your local of your local office where you have these resources running on AWS. Like we mentioned, we have Direct Connect locations in a lot of places, and we're going to talk about what that location looks like. And in Africa, we have 3 locations. We have 2 in South Africa, in Cape Town and Johannesburg, and the recent one in Lagos that is managed by Rack Center, right? And then we have these pops. We call it a pop or a cage all over the globe. These and when if we want to zoom into these locations in Africa, we have, like I mentioned, the 2 in South Africa and the one in Lagos. It comes with 10 gig and 1 gig speed options, and then we also can connect through our service providers and partners with lower. If you need less than a gig, you can still go and have like from 50 meg to a gig line from one of our service providers. But from AWS directly, you can have a 1 gig and 10 gig. And then the associated AWS region in Cape Town, we say it's associated with the Dublin region, and also we can say it's associated with the Cape Town region, the Joburg Tiraco, location is associated with Ireland and the one in Lagos is associated with London. That doesn't mean that you only connected to these regions. It's just that before, back in the days, we didn't have that option of like when you connect through direct connect, you will be able to all of your regions. But now we actually, once you have that connectivity to AWS, you're connected to our backbone network. So you actually have access to all of our regions. So it's not that it matters to say what is the associated AWS region, but we just need to mention it. Awesome. So what is a direct connect location, right? And how does it look like? We mentioned, like I mentioned, we have our backbone network globally. Like we have all of our regions, and all these regions and local zones and CloudFront POPs, all of it is connected through our backbone network. There's we built our global network with redundant links, and then customers launch their resources in these regions. Whatever region it is, I want to connect from my corporate data center. In your corporate data center, you will have your routers, you're connected through an ISP to the internet, for example, and now we want to build that private connectivity. So we built these direct connect location, right? So we went to our partners globally, and for example, we go to one co-location and we say to our partner, like Rack Center, I want to rent a cage in your data center, right? And then we take that cage and we put our devices inside that cage. We will have our patch panels, switches, and so on, and it's going to be there. Now, we, as AWS, we take care of the connectivity between these devices in that cage, in the co-location facility, and we build connectivity and to our global infrastructure, so to our backbone network. So these devices will be connected to our region. Then our customers then request to put a fiber cable between these devices and their offices. There's different ways of doing it. Some customers might have devices and cages in the same co-location, so that will make it easier, so they can just connect to our devices, and then they will be connected to the region. Or they can have that last mile to their corporate router through one of our partners. So in that co-location, we will have our devices in our own cage connected to our region. Then our partners or customers can have their own cage with their devices. There'll be a cross connect between them, and then you can do that, extend that last mile connectivity to your local router, and that help you connect that physical layer line between your router to AWS, right? There's different ways on how to do this. You either, if you want to have a 1 gig or a 10 gig line or 100 gig in certain US locations, we call it dedicated connection. Dedicated connection, meaning that you go to your AWS console and you request a 1 gig or a 10 gig line from AWS, and it's owned by the customer. We have partners that also request these lines, or resellers, because like I mentioned, if you needed less than a gig line, you need to go to one of our partners, which we call a hosted connection. So for dedicated connection, you can get speeds of at least 1 gig or 10 gig or 100 gig dedicated to a single customer, owned by the customer or the partner or the seller, and you will have that physical port in your account, and then you can provision your sub interfaces that can connect you to public and private resources. Now, if you want less than a gig, then you can go to one of our partners and you can request it, and they will provide it to you on behalf of AWS. So for example, if I don't need a gig, I can go to the partner and say, I need a 50 meg direct connect. So they can provide you with that. Because what they do, they go to AWS and they buy these 1 gig and 10 gig lines, and then they can divide it into smaller bandwidths and sell it to our customers, right? So you can have a 50, 100, 200, 300, 400, 50, 500 megabit per second, and even like 1, 2, 5, 10 gigabit per second, right? And then here, the difference is that the partner or reseller owns that direct connect as a physical connectivity, and then the sub bandwidth in the sub interface is allocated to different customers and will be assigned to these customers' accounts. From a cost perspective, when you talk about a dedicated connection that you request from AWS, you will pay for that port per hour, plus the data transfer charges from AWS to your local data center, and also there's charges from the service provider that provided that cross-connect fees and last mile charges. So remember in this picture, I have my AWS devices as AWS, and then the customer have their own devices. I still need to have that fiber connectivity, either the cross connect between the cage and the co-location to our cage, or that last mile to your local data center. So you need to keep that in mind, that you still need to pay for the partner for that fiber cable. That's from a dedicated connection perspective. Now, the total cost for hosted connection, almost the same, but then here, because the physical port itself is owned by the partner, you only pay for the sub bandwidth that you have, and also you pay for the data transfer. Now, also, you need to pay the same thing for that physical connectivity, which is your fiber cable, as a fee. So to look at it, when you talk about dedicated connection, we have the co-location where we have our services. Need to put this one here, yeah. And this is AWS take care of that connectivity between your instances and AWS cage in the meet me room, and then the customer will take over the rest of the connectivity. So first, we have that connectivity established between our cage and the region. When the customer comes and requests a 1 gig or a 10 gig port, we generate something called letter of authorization. That letter of authorization is a piece of paper that we provide for our customer that tells the customer that, okay, you'll be connected to this port in the meet me room. So they take that paper and then they go to one of the service providers, and they need to tell the service provider, okay, I requested a 1 gig or a 10 gig port from AWS, and I need to have that last mile connectivity between my data center to that meet me room. So the partner, the service provider, takes, after the customer provide that letter of authorization, take that letter of authorization, do that last mile connectivity, and they go to the meet me room in the co-location, and they say, we have this letter of authorization for customer X. I need to access the room to connect these ports. So they will connect these links to these ports to finish that last mile. That's from dedicated connection. And then you have your physical connectivity. You can build security on top of it to make it secure when you have a 10 gig line or a 100 gig line. Now, for hosted connection, before the customer requests a line, we have the physical connectivity between our cage and AWS, and the partner or reseller already have that connectivity also to AWS. They have the cross connect already established, and it's connected to their network. The partner already bought these ports, the 10 gig ports, for example, and they want to sell the portion of it to our customer. So the customer here will not contact AWS, will contact the partner. So the customer will contact the partner and say, I want a 50 meg line. Then the partner goes and just connect the customer to their cloud or their network, and they will be connected to AWS through that direct connect. So just to keep in mind, like, this is how I take care of the physical connectivity. After I create the physical connectivity, you will be able to create either public interfaces where you will receive all these public prefixes from AWS. So we'll advertise to the customer when they have a public connectivity, all our public IPs in all of our regions. They will receive it in their router, and then they can actually use like route maps and community IDs that we tag the routes with to, for example, only keep the routes for certain region and then drop the routes from other regions. So this is also can be controlled on the customer router to increase security. Or if you are connected to private connectivity through Direct Connect, you will receive the VPC ranges that you advertise via the Direct Connect, and that will allow you to connect to your VPCs. But then there's things that we need to think about before we start talking about Direct Connect. We need to do an application discovery. I need to know which application I need to connect to. Do I need to connect to my entire VPC and all the applications that I have in AWS? Do I need to connect to public resources, private resources? Do I need to connect both? And that also need to be kept in mind. After I do the discovery to which resources I want to connect on-prem to AWS, I need to have capacity planning. I cannot just go and say, oh, I think I need a gig line, which is not realistic in a lot of scenarios. So I need to know how much traffic I will be sending for a certain period of time. How long do I need the data to be transferred, and so on. So I need to have capacity planning to know exactly how much bandwidth I need, and define security. Do I need to have MACsec or not? And that's only available, for example, for 10 gig or 100 gig lines. Do I need to have VPN? Do I need to have encryption over my link, and so on? Connection type, do I need to have, like I mentioned, am I connecting to public resources or am I connected to private resources? So do I need to have a public public interface or a private interface, right? And then I need to think about my resiliency. Yes, Direct Connect provide you with 99.99% resiliency as an SLA, but I also want to increase my SLA. So what do I do then? Then I can have two Direct Connects, right? And then the two Direct Connects will be connected to different devices. For example, in one case, if one of them went down, you have the other one. In certain countries, we have two locations. So you can have one Direct Connect to each location, so you can increase your resiliency through different partners, and so on. So you need to also think about these things. And then you go and you order your Direct Connect. So if it's dedicated, you order it directly from AWS, you get the letter of authorization, like I mentioned. Then you go to the partner to do the cross connect. If it's less than a gig, then I need to go to one of the partners or resellers to provide me with that bandwidth that I need directly. Cool. So when we talk about resiliency and planning to have your Direct Connect, there are certain things just to keep in mind. Like I mentioned, from a resiliency perspective, if you want to have higher availability and higher resiliency, I need to deploy more than one Direct Connect. So from a resiliency perspective, I can have two dedicated link, for example, if I'm having a 1 gig line. If you're requesting two links, maybe from a last mile connectivity, you can think about contacting different vendors just to have more resiliency. Some customers, to minimize cost, instead of having two Direct Connect, they will have one Direct Connect and they will have a VPN connection as a backup for non-critical workload, for example. And then if the Direct Connect had an issue, you'll be connected via VPN to your applications via the internet. So how do you order the Direct Connect? Again, like I mentioned, if you connect, if you and who owns what, when you order it directly from AWS as dedicated, the customer basically own the process. They will need to create the connection in AWS. They need to download the letter of authorization. They need to provide the letter of authorization to the partner. And after the link is established, they will configure the virtual interfaces to establish that connectivity, either to public resources or private resources. For hosted connection, the customers don't need to worry about the first four steps. They will just do the final step, which is ordering the link from the partner. The partner provide that virtual interface, and then the customer just need to configure the BGP connectivity on the router using the configuration file that they will receive and establish that connectivity to AWS. From a security perspective, like I mentioned, Direct Connect comes with different security options. On the layer 2 perspective, for 10 gig and 100 gigs, it can come with MACsec, so you can have a layer 2 encryption, port speed encryption up to 100 gig, and this is terminated on our equipment and your router that you use on-prem. Can also use IPsec to have layer 3 encryption, so you can do tunneling within your interface. But that gives some limitation on your bandwidth, so you can have up to 1.25 gigabit per second because of the limitation of IPsec. And when you use IPsec, you can terminate it in the virtual private gateway in your VPC, attached to your VPC, or you can use Transit Gateway to have that tunneling. And I just wanted to end with like a use case from one of our biggest customers, Mercado Libre, it's the largest retail company in South America. And this is just for them, where they actually have connectivity at 100 gigabit per second which allow them to scale their businesses and increase resiliency. So you can see that we have customers that actually, some will ask like, who needs 100 gig? Where actually we have customers that ask for these links and requested 100 gig. Because you also, when you want to scale how much bandwidth you have, even if you didn't have the 100 gig speed in your location, customers can use Ether channels with Direct Connect. So they can actually have up to 4 links at the same time, and each one can have a 10 gig, and then you will have a 40 gig line. Cool. This is just useful links. I can share it after the session if anyone wants to have more information about Direct Connect. And that's about it for me.
Thank you, Ashraf. Wow, that was a very insightful presentation you just ran us through, right? Very well done. We appreciate that. Right. Okay.
The questions will come after, right? At the end of the session.
Well, yes. So that's the plan, to have the questions taken. But I see one particular question, and I'm not surprised. I mean, considering the fact that Rack Center is reputed as being a carrier neutral data center, we have several network providers on the line right now. And a familiar question.
Yeah.
I'd like you to take this one. We'll probably take the rest
after
the next presentation. But so they want to know, what are the eligibility criteria for becoming an AWS Direct Connect hosted partner, and what technical capabilities and infrastructure must that network provider have to qualify as a service partner? So what are what's the criteria?
This needs to be taken with our partner network, our partner team, because this is not something that I can help. Like, we have our partner team, right? So we have the team responsible to work with our resellers, so that we can take this offline and we can provide some names if that's the case.
Okay, fantastic. So we'll just park this question and then, address it after this webinar. Thank you very much again, Ashraf. So stay online. We'll have you take a few more questions.
I'm here.
All right. And so we'll go straight into the second presentation. One second. Yes, so as we shift focus right now to the role of internet exchanges and what such roles they will play as the AWS Direct Connect adopters, I'm delighted to introduce our second guest speaker, Obinna Dumike, who's the project coordinator at AFKIX. Obinna brings a wealth of experience and he's passionate about growing peering. In fact, he's known in these climes as, the internet community as a peering lead, right? And he has demonstrated this across various roles in his 12-year career. The last of those roles being as Chief Technical Officer at Cloud Exchange, before he took on the responsibility of growing an internet exchange from scratch. So Obinna will be discussing the title topic, Unlocking the Cloud, Leverage AWS Direct Connect at AFKIX. Obinna, thank you very much, and you can pick it up from here. Hi, Obinna, are you there? In case you can hear me, your line is muted. Okay, so while we wait for Obinna to join us, Ashraf, I think I can shoot this next question to you then, right?
No problem.
Can you hear me, Ashraf? Cool. Okay.
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay, so what measures, I think you took this as part of your presentation, but it's possible that the participant missed this. So what measures does AWS Direct Connect have in place to ensure high availability and redundancy, especially from this region in Lagos, Nigeria?
So Basically, that cage is connected to our backbone network with redundant fiber cables, right? And then inside that cage, when the customer requests a link and we generate that letter of authorization, we'll not provide one port, we will provide two ports the customer will connect to. So that's one thing. And if one port is down, for example, you have the other one. And if you want to increase resiliency for that one link, the customers can do multiple things. Either request another direct connect link, and if the customer requested that in the same cage, the next letter of authorization for the same customer will not be on the same device. So if one device failed, the second direct connect will be on the second device, right? If we have multiple locations in the same country, we advise customers to have the links into two different locations. So if one location is down, for example, and I never seen that happening, but just in case there was a flood or something, the other location will be also available. And if the customer don't want to have the two physical connectivity, they can have one direct connect and then a VPN as a backup for the VPCs or the transit gateway they want to connect to.
Oh, interesting. Thanks a lot. And coincidentally, you happen to have mentioned the number one natural disaster we have in
Yeah.
this part of the world, right? We're not
Yeah.
familiar with, volcanoes, earthquakes. But what it is we witness here in Lagos, Nigeria, is actually flooding, right? And that in itself informed the strategic location of Rack Center in the city of Lagos. So the data center is situated at the highest point in Lagos, which is about 30,
Nice.
30 meters above sea level.
Oh,
So
wow.
flooding is one risk that
Mm,
we've mitigated from the get-go in siting this data center. So
great.
thanks a lot for mentioning that, Ashraf.
No problem.
Okay, Obina, if you can hear me now, you can pick this up. I see your presentation is already up. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Ken. Thank you so much.
All right, please go ahead.
All right. Hello, everyone. Unlocking cloud connectivity, and of course, following the topic of conversation, how businesses networks can leverage and direct connect through AFKICS. So first of all, before we get into it, the presentation is, I will simply talk about AFKICS, just 2-3 slides. I'll be as fast as possible because of time, and then we'll get into the meat of the conversation, which is basically how can AFKICS help you with direct connect. So as mentioned by Ken when he started the webinar, AFKICS is an interconnect platform which we built here in Lagos and then hosted at Rack Center. We're able to get the KICS, the largest internet exchange provider in the world, to help us with the technical elements of that design. So that proves that we used all the global capabilities, best technologies you could get anywhere to design that platform. The goal is to actually build a functional and effective traffic localization, ensure that there is massive traffic drop over local exchange of traffic rather than going through transit, which is one of the big things that AWS Direct Connect provides. Help our participants, our clients, and so on and so forth to reduce their costs of accessing their resources on the cloud, and then also, of course, accelerates enterprise digitization, of course, looking at where we are in an emerging market, and most importantly, also leverage on that platform to provide a lot of community support, a lot of community engagement. We do a lot in that regard, with the Nigerian Parent Forum, supporting various community initiatives across. So basically, the platform, one of the major goals, as I mentioned, is being able to enable infrastructure and connectivity. And to do that, we have 3 pillars that we look into. How do we improve national and international connectivity? So on the platform, we're able to put together an enablement where anyone that has an ASN, whether you're on a local carrier, a local ISP, a regional service provider, or an international backbone carrier connectivity provider or transit provider, whatever it is that you do, you are welcome to actually connect on the platform. So that helps build that, improve those connectivity across point A to point B globally. And then we also encourage the building and access of content creations. This situation actually talks about not just content creation from independent or individual content creators, but we're also looking at businesses and enterprises, cloud companies, financial institutions, anyone that generates content or any form of traffic or data that needs to sit locally or sit internationally, but you need a low latency access to those contents. And then, of course, building some level of a very good level of resiliency and redundancy to improve the interconnection within the community. So to achieve all that, we're able to create the incentives within this our local exchange, which we'll talk about shortly. Things like how do we provide a cost-effective cross-connection to people on the exchange? How do we make sure that access to ports, access to connectivity and all that stuff, it's actually at a very minimal cost. That at the end of the day, we believe will help drive and build demand for people who are sitting locally in the country. AFKIX is designed for on two layers. One is the basic internet exchange point, which I just described. So every single network that has an ASN, ASN is an autonomous system number, which is basically a number assigned to a network to be able to identify that network within the internet routing community. So our IXP network is that first layer of AFKIX that gets all these networks together, allows them to be able to exchange traffic among themselves, peer with themselves, either from a one-on-one perspective or peer with the route server, which now distributes the traffic generally to everyone who is within the exchange. The second layer is Cloud Interconnect, which basically talks about the exact reason why we're on this call today. That's the second layer. So we are able to provide an enablement, a connectivity, layer 2 connectivity to robust cloud platforms like AWS. And that also means that to achieve this, we are not restricted to any particular vertical. Usually what you get with a couple of platforms like this is probably you have just ISPs and cloud providers, CDNs coming together to exchange traffic among ourselves. But we have built a platform that allows everybody across verticals, as long as you have a network and you have an infrastructure that sits within your environment or sits in the cloud, and you have the need to actually exchange traffic between yourself and the third party. AFKIX is a platform that does that for you. So just a quick summary. We went live in January of 2023. That's just about 18 months now. Within that period, we've been able to create 31 networks already exchanging traffic within the IXP capabilities of AFKIX. That has already driven a peak traffic of 7 gig. If you understand the region of West Africa and very well, you understand that this is a very big feat to have these networks exchange traffic within themselves, and has gotten to this traffic level within the 18th month already. On the exchange, we have 1 gig port and 10 gig ports available for uptake. Usually our ports are available for free. So you can take a 1 gig port, you can take a 10 gig port. That depends on the nature of the traffic you want to exchange within the exchange. We also, of course, that's our ASN, our route server IP addresses, which I don't want to go into. And like I mentioned, we provide cross connections for you and then give you access ports, either a 1 gig port or a 10 gig port for free. Now, this is what would key into our direct connect conversations, because if you look at this, the fact that the cross connection is free, you have access to a free port. That means that we are already driving that goal of lowering cost for you. If you have an infrastructure in your environment, which is basically, and you need those infrastructure to also speak to another infrastructure, an extension of your infrastructure you have on the cloud, that is where Direct Connect comes to play, like described by Ashraf. So basically, a Direct Connect enables a connection between what you have in your premises to go through a colocation facility like Rack Center, and then go all the way into the cloud. And since Ashraf described, you remember he described 2 ways you can connect to Direct Connect. One is a dedicated connection, which is a conversation, a transaction between you and AWS directly. And Rack Center has built a huge portfolio around that. So it's not a problem. It's one of the easiest things you could do at Rack Center when you get there and you want to connect directly to AWS. So you go through the AWS side of the conversation, come back to Rack Center, and you get that done. But we are talking about the other element of that connection, which is a hosted direct connect. This is a situation where for whatever be the reason, you are not able to directly connect to AWS, probably because you don't need a 10 gig port or a 1 gig port, or you probably don't have this massive portfolio of traffic that really does not make sense going through that whole route, or probably you want to actually lower your costs, because if you do a dedicated connection, you still have to pay for the cross connections and so on and so forth. This is where AFKIX hosted direct connection comes to play. So with this, AFKIX has fixed itself as an intermediary between AWS and you. So you could actually request for that cross connection that we talked about with AFKIX. So you come to AFKIX, we do the necessary conversations and agreements. We understand your requirements, we understand all that stuff. So we connect you to AFKIX, and AFKIX at the back end finds his own way of actually ensuring that you're able to get to AWS, who in turn also have figured out their own way of actually routing the traffic all the way through their backbone into the actual AWS network. Within our facility, we're able to provide you free cross connections, and we have physical 1 gig and 10 gig ports. Of course, there are always fiber optic ports. Even though there are fiber optic ports, we are not against having the conversations. If you have an Ethernet port, we can always sit down and figure out a way of making that work for you. If at the extreme situation, fiber optic connection does not work for you. But remember that if you are going to do a dedicated connection all the way to AWS directly, you would have to have a fiber optic connection. Then we also have, of course, Ashraf mentioned this, you have access to sub speeds, bandwidth. So you could do 50 meg, 100 meg, 200 meg, and so on and so forth, up to into with the gigabit capacities. These are usually done through a logical connection. So you would do a physical connection either on a 1 gig port or 10 gig port, depending on what your capacity is at the end of the day into AFKIX. But when we route your traffic into AWS, we would have to actually do a sub interface and create some logical connections all the way into AWS. And of course, you can have multiple VLANs, that's multiple logical connections, depending on what you require, depending on, as it goes. So the process is actually pretty very simple. First of all, for a hosted connection, connection to the hosted direct connection, you would have to reach out to us, talk to us that you want to do this is what you want to do. We'll do a traffic analysis. We understand your critical load. We understand what you want to take to the cloud. We understand your security requirements. We understand your routing requirements. What is your closest port? Are you already available at rack center and all that stuff? So having all that stuff done, that we now get into the second level, which is to physically terminate you to AFKIX ports. So AFKIX has a couple of switches already hosted at rack center. So we would physically terminate you to one of the ports on AFKIX. And once that is done, we would now start the actual configuration, which is where we do go through configuring the BGP peering configurations, depending on, remember, AFKIX is either an IXP, and an internet intercloud connection as well. So it depends on what we're trying to achieve. We do those connections, establish the logics, the security, and all the stuff that you need to do, and then we deliver the service and make sure it goes live, and then transition into the billing stage. The billing, some people would ask, so the billing would not include the things like cross connection, because that is already a free service that we are offering to you day one. It will not include the physical port access of either 1 gig or 10 gig, as the case may be. That is already a given. But there are pricing components that you need to be aware of. For example, and these as defined by is a standard global definition by AWS of how the pricing for direct connection goes. So the first element is the capacity. The capacity in this situation is what is the maximum rate of data that you want to transfer between your on-prem facility and the cloud. So you remember when we talked about whether you needed a 10 gig or a 10 Mbps or 100 Mbps or a 1 gig, as the case may be. So that capacity is defined, and there is actually a bill for that capacity. Usually when you go to your AWS dashboard, you would see you would see that bill. If you are doing a dedicated connection, then from a hosted connection is part of the conversation you would have with us at AFKIX, or whoever is your preferred hosted provider. Then the second rate you have to consider is the port hours, which is actually a measure of time that the port has been provisioned, or logical connection, as the case may be, has been provisioned for you by either AWS or by AFKIX. Then the third layer is the data transfer out. If you remember when Ashraf was discussing, he mentioned that any traffic that goes out of AWS is actually billable, but the fourth one is data transfer in, which is whatever you upload into AWS is usually provided free. So even though that bill is zero, of course, it's a recognizable bill, but it's zero. You don't have to pay for it. So of course, you can always go to aws.amazon.com/direct connect and pricing to have a detailed look of how this works. On that portal, there's actually a detailed breakdown, including an example or a sample of what your cost could look like if you decide to go do a direct connection with AWS. So we promise you at AFKIX that if you decide and you have a genuine reason to work with us, and we are very happy to work with you, that we can actually guarantee you low latency. This is a given because it is a physical connection locally available at rack center. I think while Ashrat was speaking, I think Ken also mentioned there was a question that came: is this a physical? Are there AWS physical equipment, network equipment at the data center? Yes, there are. AWS has a couple of racks that has their own equipment physically located that we would connect to, and we would route your traffic to. So with that, you don't have to go through the internet. You don't have to go through multiple hops over the internet until you get to the AWS region that you want to go to. So AWS has taken care of all the backbone routing that takes you all the way back to whatever region you want to get to. So it's guaranteed latency drop, because it's a simple point A to point B in just maybe less than 1 meter cable or something like that. So latency is guaranteed, right? Then low IP access costs, of course, since you don't have to deal with the transit costs, you don't have to pay huge bandwidth costs to get to Ireland or to get to Dublin, to get to London or wherever region or where your cloud service is located. So that whole cost is eliminated for you. Then, of course, AFKIX offers free cross connection if you are using the hosted connection through AFKIX, and of course, improved traffic and control. So what we do is that because you go through us, you can actually do your own filtering. We would work with you to do this, assuming you've not done this before on your network. We'll sit down with you, we understand your traffic, we understand which particular services within your infrastructure that you want to move to the cloud, assuming you don't want to move all of them. And because the hosted connection, when we terminated with AWS, we actually have downloaded their full routing table. We can actually filter out what is necessary and what is not necessary. So there's a full control over what comes from you all the way to AWS and what comes from AWS all the way back to you. So you're able to have a sanitized traffic that goes back and forth. And of course, Ashraf mentioned the available security layers between AWS and either yourself or hosted provider, which is also extended to you. We've also built a couple of securities within our facility. You will have multiple bandwidth options. Of course, we mentioned this 10 meg, 100 meg, 200 meg, as the case may be. And because of AWS policy, you cannot oversubscribe what have been apportioned to you. We can't also do the same thing going all the way back to AWS. But what we have done is that we have the capability of working with you to monitor your traffic as it grows. When it gets to a point where you are hitting about 80% of your traffic, you will be aware of, obviously, because we believe you are monitoring your traffic, but we would also inform you that you're at about 80% of your traffic. So it gives you enough time to readjust, either by expanding your bandwidth or re-engineering your traffic so that you don't oversubscribe whatever you have, and you have the capability to actually expand or shrink whatever capability, whatever bandwidth that you have on the service. So just to give you some comfort, our platform is designed with best practices from ManaRest. Of course, I'm not going to go into details of what ManaRest is, but this is the mutually agreed standard for routing and security on the internet. So this, when you design your platform on a ManaRest practices. So it means that you have built a platform that is secured and that is trusted by the rest of the global internet routing community. We also built the platform to be a platform or an exchange redundant platform in Lagos. So what it means is that even if you are already participating in another internet exchange in Lagos, we are not saying you should pull away from that internet exchange, but what we are saying is that, look, there is a lot more that we're putting on the table. So you can actually have dual connections. The most important part of this number two is that if you are actually sitting at Rack Center and you are on a different exchange, for example, you're an internet exchange point of Nigeria specifically, Rack Center will give you a free cross connection to IXPN. They will also give you free cross connection to AFKIX. So you have no reason to leave the IXPN where you are currently. In fact, it's encouraged that you remain on IXPN, route your traffic, but do proper local preference configuration so that your traffic can go either way, depending on what traffic you are trying to exchange. Of course, we are providing our internet exchange and a cloud interconnect platform like I described on a layer 2 level, so you don't have to worry about what happens across the internet and so on and so forth. I earlier mentioned that we built our platform in partnership with Decade. So one of the great things that they built or we designed and they built in the course of this conversation is to put the DDoS attack protection on the network. So for small service providers or small network enterprises that really don't have a robust DDoS prevention technologies or tools within their facility, you can leverage on AFKIX to handle that. So once you identify any malicious traffic, you can simply give it to us. We'll black hole it for you on our platform. And then, of course, we've designed a perfect option for you to actually do exchange and peering within the local environment based on global standards. So I'll be fast so that I'm already out of time. So our internet exchange is built to help you improve internet quality in Nigeria, help you lower your costs, built with redundancy and reliability. You can peer seamlessly. This is important because what happens is that, look, some people will say, look, I don't want to peer with your route server. That's from an internet IX perspective. You don't have to peer with our route server. It's not necessary. So all you want is AWS direct connection. So you don't have to worry about how the IX platform works, the route server, and so on and so forth. All you need to do is when you get your connection into Rack Center, into AFKIX, we would run a direct dedicated connection for you from the platform all the way into AWS. So you don't have to actually deal with the route server and so on and so forth. However, if that is your requirement, you want to have dual leg within the platform where you can get to AWS and then at the same time you're able to do your local routing, that is also possible. Then you can also sit within the same platform to route among yourselves. So an example would be two service providers that have decided to share traffic between themselves, but they don't want to actually go outside of the exchange to pay for another cross connection or to pay for another resources port and so on and so forth. You can actually let us know. We'll create a pairing between both of you within the exchange. So to get started is very simple. Let me know. My email address on the screen. You can also write info@afkix.net. My phone number is there, and you can actually go look at our connected networks on our website so that you can actually see your peers. Because usually when we talk about these things, it sounds like a fairy tale, but you can go on this platform and see other networks, other names that you are familiar with who have already signed up to work with AFKIX, who are already there exchanging traffic and doing great things already. You can check us out on PeeringDB as well. You can check our looking glass, lg.afkix.net. You can go to our website and then you can write Rack Center. But most importantly, let's have the conversation, because the conversation is what might actually expand your horizon or actually get this conversation going. We could sit with you. It's not a paid service. We sit with you and having a conversation. You don't have to pay for having a conversation. We'll sit down, we talk, explain to us what your requirements are, explain to us which traffic you want to send to the cloud. We can even help you give insights in terms of how regulatory implications are applicable to what you want to do and get that conversation going. So that will be all from me. Ken, thank you so much.
Obina, thank you so much. I mean, it's not a wonder why you're referred to as Mr. Pairing. I mean, I can almost feel the enthusiasm, from your presentation. So thanks a lot for that. We've got a few questions coming in during the course of both presentations. Let me just take the first one by Kunle Ajayi. He's asking if you can get a recorded session after this webinar. Kunle, the answer is yes. You can get this on our YouTube channel, and it will be available immediately after this webinar. Right after that, there's a question for you, Ashraf. So this participant, Bidemi James, wants to know, does AWS setup in Nigeria support maximum resiliency, in quotes, maximum resiliency? Does the setup in Nigeria support that? That's for you, Ashraf.
So in Nigeria, we have the one location so far. So if you want to have more resiliency, it will be by having that direct connect to that cage, or having two links. If you have two links, then you will be connected to the different devices to the same location. And then you can also have that VPN connection over the internet as a backup. So I wouldn't say maximum resiliency, but you can increase your resiliency by having a redundant link and also having that VPN connection to AWS.
Oh, thank you, Ashraf. Next question is for Obina. What infrastructure requirements are needed at our end to connect AWS Direct Connect via AppKicks?
Okay. So to connect to AWS via AppKicks, the equipment you need a simple network routing equipment. So if you have a layer 2 equipment, because this is a layer 2 service, so you can actually have a switch that you can configure VLANs on, and that VLANs could actually be passed through to us. But we would naturally advocate for you to have a router in between, because on the router level, you can actually do traffic filtering, traffic profiling, and so on and so forth. And we can also, of course, pass through those VLANs across, but that's a basic switching equipment helps.
All right, thank you. Zico Mbamwe from Zambia. Ashraf, he wants to know, does AWS bring any network equipment on-prem? What specific equipment is needed? This is another question around equipment.
Yeah, so
Ashraf.
we don't provide the equipment per se. The configuration we do provide. So basically, it's a physical link with layer 2 configuration. So for example, your device needs to be able to support BGP and also sub interfaces. So you will have a router that you have a physical port on it. You will divide it into sub interfaces tagged with a VLAN, and then you will configure BGP configuration on it. So the configuration we do provide, but the physical equipment needs to be provided by the customer.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from David Alozier, and Ashraf, he wants to know, how can he use AWS Direct Connect without internet subscription? Does it mean there is a point-to-point device from on-premise to Direct Connect?
Yes. So the Direct Connect is isolated from internet. The Direct Connect is not over the internet. The idea of having a Direct Connect is to have that fiber connectivity between your device to the DX location. So it will be dependent from your internet connection. So if you used to use AWS, if you used to use the internet to go to AWS, you don't need that internet connection, or you can reduce the bandwidth, because Direct Connect is a separate line and that's why it gives you that consistent bandwidth that we were talking about and the performance.
Okay. Now, Obinan, the same David also wants to know, does AppKicks have an API portal? Is there a document that better explains AppKicks business opportunities?
Yes, so you can actually go to our website, appkicks.net. There are load of documents and information that you can actually get from that portal. However, I am a consultative kind of person. Send me an email, I'll sit down with you, understand, answer your questions. If there is any question I can answer, I can guarantee you that there are a load of other people behind the scene that can answer those questions.
Okay, and then the next question, I think either of you can answer this. The participant wants to know if there are actually direct connect partners currently in Lagos, Nigeria.
I honestly, personally don't have that information.
Okay, okay.
All right, so you can actually go to AWS website. Unfortunately, I don't have that link, but you can
I
Google.
do. I checked that before the call, and it doesn't list anyone in that
But
way. Yeah.
however, that is what AFKIX is. So you can talk to AFKIX. That's where partner one can help you with that information. We can help you with that connection. But if
Binna,
you
you
want to
need to
see,
work on you need to work on having your name on the AWS page.
so, but if you want to if you want to see a full list of every partner globally, not just in Nigeria, you can go to the AWS website. I can find that you are unfortunately not on this call, but you can follow up. I will share that link with you after the call. Whoever reaches out, I will share the link with you. Unfortunately, I don't have it handy. There's a list on the AWS website that shows list of all the partners, direct connect partners globally.
I have it if you want me to share it.
Okay, Ashraf, another question, this time around from Isaac Daniel.
Mm.
So he wants to know how will he benefit from AWS Direct Connect in a multi-cloud environment? Is there provision for pairing with other cloud, other global cloud providers?
We get that question a lot. So no, we don't. We don't have pairing connections with the other cloud providers, but there are service provider partners that provide that connectivity. So, for example, I think Equinix provide that because they have their global network. So they already have direct connects to AWS, and they have the same mechanisms to the other cloud providers. And through their exchange locations and their network, you can connect different cloud to each other. So some service providers globally, they can provide that mechanism if you want to connect different cloud providers together. But
Okay.
from us directly, no.
Ashraf, the name is AFKIX, actually. You are trying to say AFKIX, yes. So,
The name is AFKIX, yeah. So AFKIX provide that connectivity.
yes, so that's what we do for
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
We're a cloud interconnect provider. So because the conversation is focused on AWS Direct Connect, so we have to talk about AWS Direct Connect. But when we meet offline, we can actually help you understand all the cloud services, not just international cloud providers. We also have connection to local cloud providers as well, here in Africa as well, here in Nigeria, and so on and so forth. So we can look at all the multi-cloud environment you want to reach and figure out how to help you with that. It's what we do.
All right. So Abdullahi is curious. Abdullahi wants to know why just 3 points of presence, right, in Africa for AWS, whereas there are much more POPs in Europe and the Americas. Is there no demand in Africa to justify establishment of more POPs?
Yeah, good question. We keep adding up to these locations. We always look at the local demands and where the traffic is generated from to our regions, and we see the market in that place. So, for example, there's a big movement in Nigeria to start using AWS, and that's why we decided to have a location, for example, in Nigeria to our regions, right? So we do have, yes, POPs globally, and we keep monitoring all these locations and not just in Africa, in all the globe, like where we will see more traffic generated, we start looking into direct connect, and not just direct connect. We also look at, for example, implementing CloudFront, for example, service as a CDN POP. So you will start seeing these things more and more in the future. Hopefully, there will be more locations. Me personally, would like to have more locations in Africa. There's a bunch of places where we need to actually have a local presence.
Right, even though that will spell more workload for you, but I guess you can handle.
It's
Yeah.
fine.
All right. Adeyinka Oduton, this is a technical question, Obina. He said, please give an outline of how the physical and logical connectivity runs from his data center to AWS through AFKIX.
Yeah, so it's actually pretty simple. Before you get a logical connection, there has to be a physical connection. So what happens is that from your network equipment or for a data center, you would have to have a physical cable connection that goes into the AFKIX switch. Our port is configured for either a 1 gig or a 10 gig, as the case may be. So you would get a fiber cable that would run from your facility into an AFKIX switching system. Then once that is successfully done, at the back end between AFKIX all the way into AWS, that your physical interface would now be either assuming you want multiple connections to AWS, then we have to do sub interfaces. But most importantly is that we have to create VLANs, either one VLAN or multiple VLAN as the case may be. It has to be a 802.1q VLAN kind of VLAN. That VLAN will now be routed all the way into AWS and vice versa. So it's something you do every single day. That will say it's going to AWS doesn't make it suddenly special. It's trust me, it's a regular layer 2 connection.
Thank you. So Ashraf, this seems like a digression from the focus on direct connect, but Bidemi Ladipo wants to know if you have an AWS transit gateway in Nigeria.
The transit gateway is not a service that we locate in the direct connect location. The transit gateway is a regional service that sits in one of our regions. So in Africa, for example, we have the Cape Town region. And for example, the Cape Town region, when you can create a transit gateway in that region. Once you create the transit gateway, you can attach it to your VPCs, and then the transit gateway can have a transit interface that connects you to the direct connect gateway. The direct connect gateway is that global resource that is connected to your physical link. So what happens is when you want to connect to your VPC, you will have that physical connectivity from your data center to that co-location. That co-location will be connected to our backbone network, and we will have, and you can create a direct connect gateway. The direct connect gateway is a global service. It will have entities in all over the globe where you want to use it. And then you can create that transit connectivity between the transit gateway and that direct connect gateway in order to be able to connect to your VPCs.
Okay, thank you very much.
And can I also state, because we've used this nomenclature, your data center to co-location facility a lot. I think it's important to clarify. When we say from your data center to co-location facility into AWS, your data center in this situation is basically a collection of your infrastructure, a group of servers and network equipment and so on and so forth. Not necessarily one giant co-location facility somewhere. So that your rack that have your servers and switches, and that's what we are referring to as your data center, because it's your data center, right? So it's not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to have a giant data center somewhere like you get with some of our financial institutions or big enterprises and say, look, I've not gotten to that level yet. No, that's not what we're talking about. So you could have that, and you can also have one server or two servers or three servers or something, as long as these equipments are interconnected together and have the capability of actually going all the way to AWS and all the way back. And then you also probably have another application on AWS that you want to get those two servers to communicate between themselves. So that when we say data center, that's what we mean.
All right, thank you. And on the back of your clarification on data center, there's a question from Clever Theory. Apparently he's writing in from Zambia, and he says, we are Infratel data center located in Zambia. So he's asking you, Ashraf, which nearest AWS node can they pair from to provide direct connect services to their clients from Zambia?
That's a question needs to be taken with one of the service providers in Zambia, because we also need to look at the local presence of our service providers and see where are they connected. So if they, for example, have connectivity already to Nigeria, then there's two factors to think about here. Latency is a physical distance. So the further you are from the region, the higher latency that you will have. So when you want to pick your region, you want to check which region gives you the better latency in general, right? That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is that your service providers in the country, where do they have global connectivity? So if they have good latency, for example, to South Africa, and you have your resources in the Cape Town region, then the latency will be better for you if you're using the Cape Town region with a link from your service provider to Cape Town, because we don't have a POP in Zambia. So you need to see if one of the service providers can provide you with that connectivity all the way to South Africa. The same thing if you don't have a connectivity to South Africa and you're not launching your resources in Cape Town, maybe Nigeria will be closer to you, and the service providers already have connectivity to Nigeria, and they can help you with that last mile connectivity. And from the Nigeria DX location, you can connect to the region that you have your resources at.
All right. Thank you, Ashraf. So another one for you, Ashraf. I know this is not on your street, right? But I will still throw it anyway.
Let's take a shot.
Because it's yeah, because it's consistently coming from two participants.
Yeah.
It has to do with pricing. So BDME James and another anonymous attendee, they want to know, how can your services be priced in the local currency, right? Especially considering and the background to this is I don't know if you're aware, but the local currency is taking a beating, right now, and so accessing FX is becoming more and more of a challenge. So what would you say to such users?
I work with I used to be based in South Africa, first of all, so I'm aware of these issues. And also now, for example, I cover customers in some places in Africa, and we have a challenge with the currency, to be honest. And from an AWS perspective, the currency to pay with is the dollar, right? And then the challenge is that the currency exchange will change over time, right? Today it might be better, tomorrow it will be worse. And customers, if you don't have a bank account in dollars to pay with dollars, that can be a challenge, right? Unfortunately, because of regulations and the central banks in a lot of countries, it's something out of our control. And we try to help as much as possible with these conversations. And the best place to start this conversation is with your account manager. So if you have a named account manager that you talk to, bring these conversations to the account managers, because in certain places, we start working on some solutions to help with our customers, but not everything is valid everywhere, right? So keep these conversations open with your account managers, and hopefully there will be a solution soon on how to help the customers, for example, in Nigeria.
All right, thank you so much for attempting that question, Ashraf. Obina, we're rounding this up right now. We have a few more minutes before we end the webinar. But I think I have two for you, Obina. The first one has to do with Stephen Makinde. He says he's an existing client of AppKicks. He's currently connected on AppKicks. And so he wants to know, can he have a direct connect to AWS through AppKicks here in Nigeria, and then utilize the connection in other locations where they have their resources with AWS?
That's correct. That's actually what this whole conversation has been about in the first place. So you're already on AppKick, so you already did the first step of that journey. So the second step of the journey is just reach out to us. If you're already on AppKick, that means we already have some conversations going. So let's talk, and then we can understand how to extend that service to AWS, and what bandwidth and all the other elements that we talked about that needs to go to AWS and back. And of course, within the AWS network, the AWS already dealt with, I think Ashraf mentioned it, how to go between locations, between regions, between zones in the AWS is already taken care of. They handle that at the back end. So if you get into the direct connect platform of AWS in Lagos, by extension, AWS route your traffic to all the other places. Although there's something called SiteLink, which nobody talked about that, because we're not trying to get too technical in this conversation, but you can actually use SiteLink to link multiple VPCs or zones that you have within the AWS environment. It's some sort of technical conversation we don't get into, but I can guarantee you that the AWS environment is already pre-built to get you to anywhere you want to get to within the AWS environment. Except Ashraf, do you want to share some light on SiteLink?
Yep. SiteLink, I didn't mention it because
in a minute and a half, Ashraf, sorry, you didn't do that in a minute and a half.
Technical. So SiteLink, basically, if you have an office in London and office in Lagos, and you have a direct connect from your office in London to the direct connect location there, and you have a direct connect from your office in Lagos to the direct connect location in Lagos, you can use SiteLink to actually connect your office in London to the office in Lagos through the two direct connects through our backbone network, instead of going through the internet. So basically, it's like having an MPLS network between your two offices using direct connects.
All right. So this is going to be the last question. right? And Obina, you will take this. It says, how does AFCIX currently verify and merge the security and certification and governance while working with companies in Nigeria? I don't know if you can make sense of this.
Could you say that? Take it again, please.
Yeah. So how does AFCIX currently verify and merge the security, certification, and governance while working with companies in Nigeria and out of direct connect or any other service use?
Okay, I think that merge would be managed or something. So basically I'm trying to interpret the question, right? So I think it comes in multiple forms. How do we verify and manage security and certification and so on and so forth? Like I said, we already have these security implementations pre-built on the platform. I didn't want to go technical across in terms of different individual certifications that have been built on the platform. So that's already is pre-built, and we can make those documentations available to you at any point in time that you want it. So the security is pre-built on the system. The necessary certifications are already gotten and available. And not so importantly, it specifically sits in Rack Center, who also have most of these certifications already pre-built within this Rack Center internal systems as well. But in terms of how companies that come into AFCIX, their own certifications and their own internal security requirements and so on and so forth, if that is part of your question, we wouldn't dictate for other companies the kind of certifications and control and security measures they have. We can only make sure that whatever traffic they sent into AFCIX meets some minimum traffic requirements, because we are compliant to MANA-RES. And if we are compliant to MANA-RES, then that means our interaction, the traffic between you and us, also have to adhere to certain basic security guidelines as well. And not just for companies in Nigeria, it's any network that is able to, we have company networks that are connecting to AFCIX that are not just Nigerian networks. I'm talking about global companies from the United States, from other African countries, and so on and so forth. The standards sit for everyone.
All right. Thank you so much, Obina and Ashraf. I think we've come to the end of this webinar. It's been a very inciting and engaging 1.5 hours, right? Even though we still have a few minutes to go. So I want to thank both speakers, and also want to thank our participating audience. You've actually kept the conversation pretty lively. I want to tell you that the conversation doesn't have to end here. We're available after this webinar to, respond to your inquiries. Again, you can reach us at info@rackcenter.com or through either of our speakers who shared their contact information earlier on. So it's been a very insightful session, and we've learned the benefits and functionalities of AWS Direct Connect, its impact in extending on-premise networks into AWS, as well as a critical role an internet exchange like AFCIX plays in enhancing connectivity into AWS. So we want to thank you once again for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend this webinar, and to state that we will keep you informed on the next NEMIDA plan for the second half of the year, and we will be reaching you with information on that. Thank you once again, and it's been my pleasure anchoring this session here at Rack Center. Thank you.